Full steam ahead.
Who really invented the airplane? Just when you think of aviation, the first name that comes to mind is the Wright brothers, correct?
When the names Orville and Wilbur Wright are mentioned, the beginning of aviation is often the thought that follows. But history is changing, and it may be time to add another name to that conversation.
But could you believe that around the same time, a Pineville, Louisiana man patented his plan for the first airplane?
It's a story that it truly is unbelievable, and not only unbelievable that it happened, unbelievable that it's being ignored until 2023.
That's right. Before the world ever got wind of the Wright brothers, there was another, a black man whose wings were clipped not by gravity, but by history's silence. A visionary whose dream of flight began in the shadows, far from headlines and accolades, and under the crushing weight of racial oppression and inequality. And very sad as this could all be, the solemn truth of this history has long been swept under the carpet despite its indisputable authenticity until the year 2023, when it was officially acknowledged. That genius, the first inventor of the airplane, is none other than Charles Frederick Page of Pineville.
I think Page deserves that whenever the Wright brothers are mentioned, Page should also be mentioned to some extent in our national history books.
With no access to elite institutions, no wealthy backers, and no proper recognition, Charles Frederick Page built with his hands, studied with his heart, and flew with a purpose far greater than fame in order to prove that black excellence could rise above the limits placed upon it. He was a man very well known to be one ahead of his time, a fact we could readily confirm from the mouth of Joe Page himself, Frederick Page's grandson.
He was well ahead of his time in even thinking that, and trying to get people together to do farming. He did a variety of things.
While America marveled at his rising age of invention, his story was buried beneath prejudice, his genius overlooked, and his name nearly lost to time. But his ambition, it soared.
He took his life savings. He built a working model, tested it at his home in Pineville, and then shipped it off by train to St. Louis, Missouri, where he was going to fly the airplane in St. Louis, Missouri, and then become a chapter in all of our history books.
After spending probably his life savings to put this working model together and then paid to ship it off to St. Louis World Fair, and it never arrived. And so I'm imagining that was a huge disappointment to him.
Page was said to have spent what was probably his entire life savings in putting his working model together, after which he had paid for it to be shipped off to St. Louis World Fair to be entered into the Louisiana Purchase Exposition. But most unfortunately, it never did arrive there.
His plane was destroyed or stolen, possibly due to the fact he was an African American.
I think that because he was a black man who had the audacity to try something that had never been done before is probably one of the reasons why the model disappeared and the history was never corrected to show that.
I think it was actually, number one, probably found by someone who didn't want it to get there and was destroyed, or it was stolen.
This turn-up was a huge blow to Mr. Page. He was never really able to gather up for himself enough money again to build another airship, as he had a family to take care of all along, a task which obviously is impossible to be ignored by all well-meaning parents.
He had to care for his family. He just never saw an opportunity to gather up that enough money again and deny his family of a decent living. So he never pursued it again.
This video is not just a footnote in aviation history. This is a legacy reclaimed, the true story of the black aviator who soared the sky before the Wright brothers, an unsung pioneer who dared to fly while the world still looked the other way. And why he is not actually known by every schoolboy and girl today is a sad mystery that needs to be corrected. Paul Leo Ortego, another black man, also invented the working passenger-carrying version of the helicopter. Why he is also not better known is a sad mystery. What is also a strange coincidence concerning Charles Frederick Page and Paul Leo Ortega is both men lived about 2 miles from each other during their lives in central Louisiana. However, as we delve right into the full cause of this video, don't forget to kindly support our works by hitting the like button in front of you. Share with friends and families to keep spreading awareness as much as you can, and kindly subscribe to the channel to stay tuned in for more thought-provoking videos if you are yet to. Now, you just hold on tight. Let us dive into this touching aviation saga. The journey of Charles Frederick Page began in the most oppressive of circumstances. He was born into enslavement. This brutal system not only deprived individuals of their freedom then, but also systematically denied them access to education and knowledge on the pain of mutilation and death. However, Page would demonstrate an extraordinary commitment to self-improvement and education despite these formidable barriers. In an era when teaching enslaved people that to read and write was often prohibited and could even be punished by law, Charles Page's pursuit of literacy was a radical act of defiance. He had taught himself to read and write, a remarkable achievement considering the systemic efforts to keep people of African descent in a state of enforced ignorance. Page would go ahead to educate himself and become known for his deep thinking and entrepreneurial spirit, teaching about many subjects and also attempting to execute many of the ideas conceived in the eye of his keen mind. Page was skilled in a variety of occupations, although he worked primarily as a contractor for the timber industry, sourcing timber for specific requirements of other industries, including railroad ties, telegraph poles, and bridge beams. He also produced and sold charcoal, set up a small cabinet-making business, and was a botanical farmer who sold plants to drug companies to make medicines. He also helped to clear the ground of tree stumps for the Greenwood Memorial Park in Pineville, Louisiana, then assisted the superintendent with landscaping. Inspired by this, he worked to set up the Lincoln Memorial Cemetery, also in Pineville, where he would later on be buried after his death. After marrying Ida Kelso in 1880, the couple would settle in Pineville, Louisiana, where they raised 13 children. Page's inspiration for his airship invention came from observing the flight of dragonflies. His family recounts that he would spend hours watching these insects, fascinated by their flight dynamics.
The story goes that he would watch those things in flight for hours at a time, and I assume that it's where he got his inspiration to build an airship.
That is Joseph Page, talking about Charles Page, who happened to be his grandfather. Granddaughter Caddy Page Williams heard the same story.
At an early age, I was told that he had this invention, the airship or the airplane.
Says Caddy. According to an interview with his daughter Eva Page in the Alexandria Daily Town Talk, in the 1930s, Charles Page's fascination with flight was sparked by the agile flight of a mosquito hawk. Inspired by nature, he'd often watch bugs fly and remark,
"I could do that."
The ardent curiosity Mr. Page felt within would lead him to design and build a full-scale, bi-ballooned airship between 1899 and 1903, driven by his determination, encapsulated in his phrase, "After years of experimentation and innovation, Page's perseverance paid off when he successfully created a working airplane behind his home at the corner of Edgewood Drive and Highway 28 East, culminating 5 years of dedicated labor." His aircraft was a complicated mechanical balloon device. Firstly, the invention stood out for its innovative design as a bi-balloon airship, distinct from the Zeppelin airships that were prevalent during the same era. Secondly, the bi-balloon airship's boat hull included a rudder for steering purposes and a propeller operated by a gas motor to send the airship in any direction. Page's invention improved stability, propulsion, and control, advancing airship technology in the United States. In the month of April, the 24th, 1903, Page would submit a patent application for his innovative aircraft design, predating the Wright brothers' demonstration at Kitty Hawk by several months. Although the patent process took 3 years to complete, typical for the era, Page's invention garnered attention in the meantime. During this period, the Town Talk featured an interview with Page, showcasing his life-size aircraft model and highlighting his achievements. Notably, this recognition was remarkable given the racial climate of the Jim Crow era. when newspapers rarely acknowledged the accomplishments of black Southerners. Page's achievement took place against the backdrop of the Jim Crow era, a time characterized by relentless white supremacy and racial segregation. These were years marked by the systematic denial of opportunities and recognition to black Americans. More insidiously, these years were marked by of black people who committed the cardinal sin of becoming successful in the plain view of their white counterparts. This stark reality would deeply impact the course of Page's life and work. In 1904, Page invested his life savings in building a full-scale model of his airplane, aiming to showcase it at the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis, Missouri. However, in a twist of fate, the airship mysteriously vanished en route to the exhibition and never reached its destination. The fate of the aircraft remains unknown to this day. This unfortunate loss likely contributed to Page's groundbreaking invention fading into obscurity, depriving him of the recognition he had worked tirelessly to achieve. The Louisiana Purchase Exposition was a world fair celebrating the centennial of the historic land deal. Interestingly, the centennial was marked a year after the actual anniversary, as the Louisiana Purchase was signed in 1803. The fair featured an aeronautic competition with a substantial prize of $500,000, along with other awards. Disheartened, Page rejected an offer of $30,000 for his patent and abandoned his invention. Page's patent was one of the earliest ever granted to a black man, and it was the first patent on an airship, an extraordinary accomplishment, particularly given the racial challenges faced in this era. Speculation years later from his grandson Joseph P. Page suggested that shipping it was the custom of the era. Since it was shipped on a freight train, there was no room for Page as a passenger. Eva Page, the inventor's daughter, who suspected racism of the Jim Crow era as the main reason why her dad's airship was stolen, was heard in a 1974 interview in Alexandria Daily Town Talk, a local newspaper, saying,
"It was stolen. After that, Papa never built another one."
Indeed, pages from the 1904 St. Louis World Fair programs, available for viewing through the Digital Library of the University of Missouri, show no record of Page's device among the other airship displays. Despite the challenges he faced, Page would successfully secure United States patent number 817,422 for his airship on April 10, 1906. Notably, this was just a month before the Wright brothers received their patent, U.S. patent number 821,393, for their flying machine, which was granted on May 22, 1906. After the loss of his airship, Page received several inquiries and offers to buy his patent, but he refused. He was so discouraged after the airship disappeared that he basically gave up any further attempts at constructing another airship. Years later, some sources began questioning the authenticity of Page's invention, prompting his grandson, Joseph Page, to respond. In an email, Joseph clarified that the device was indeed tested and successfully flew, setting the record straight.
Family history has been consistent with the belief that the airship was flown by my grandfather. He planned to fly the airship in a contest in St. Louis. I have known about my grandfather's invention my entire life, but stopped talking about it because nobody believed the story.
The United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO, noted that Charles Frederick's airship and that of the Wright brothers were very different technologies, and neither patent would have affected the other being granted regardless of whose was filed first. They added that airships like that of Page rely on buoyancy from balloons to lift the craft, as opposed to airplanes like the Wright brothers' inventions. The idea of airships has been around in some form since at least the 17th century, and Page's was an improvement on existing inventions. It is just like a case scenario where a sailboat is compared to a motorboat. Both require a lot of expertise to create, but they run very differently. Although this response from the USPTO might have initially diminished the significance of Page's work, his family, particularly his children and grandchildren, tirelessly worked to shed light on his remarkable invention, ultimately securing his rightful place in history. Page quickly moved past the loss of his invention and devoted his life to helping his community individually and collectively in many ways during the Jim Crow era. In one instance, he developed ways for local tenant farmers to diversify crops and infrastructure that would eventually allow them to own their farms over time. In a notable example of his community leadership, Page played a key role in preventing a potentially deadly race riot in 1911. The crisis began when a white student at Louisiana College, now Louisiana Christian University, was fatally attacked and robbed by a black man in Pineville. As tensions escalated, Page helped establish a group of mediators comprising both white and black community leaders who met at Emmanuel Baptist Church to find a peaceful resolution. The gathering brought together city officials, including the mayor and chief of police, to calm the situation and prevent further violence, ultimately averting a potentially disastrous confrontation. Through his tireless efforts, Page established a range of initiatives to support the black community. These included a brickyard, a business organization for black entrepreneurs, and provision of essential services such as coffin making and amateur dentistry for those in need. His experience working at Greenwood Memorial Park Cemetery did not only lead to improvements in funeral practices, but has also highlighted the pressing need for a dedicated cemetery for black people. To address this gap, Page had founded Lincoln Memorial Cemetery in Pineville, a pioneering venture that provided a sacred space for the community to lay their loved ones to rest. Located on Melrose Street, it was the first cemetery of its kind in central Louisiana. Going forward, Charles Frederick Page died at his son's home in Alexandria, Louisiana, on November 18, 1937, and was laid to rest in the Page family crypt at the Lincoln Memorial Cemetery. Regarding her father's legacy, Page's daughter, Eva, once said in her 1974 interview in the Alexandria Daily Town Talk,
He always thought people were more important than airships ran handouts.
in recent years, Mr. Page's achievements have been remembered and reclaimed locally and nationally through the efforts of his grandchildren, Joseph P. Page and Oris V. Cooper Jr., as well as historian and author Michael D. Wynn.
It was more of a balloon-type plane, but it's now being heralded in a major exhibit in the Black Inventors Hall of Fame in Wharton, New Jersey,
said Wynn, who self-published the book, Charles Frederick Page and Leo Ortego, Heroes in the Birth of Aviation in America, in 2022. Thanks to Wynn's efforts, the Louisiana State Museum and the Louisiana Civil Rights Museum honored Page's legacy with a posthumous award recognizing his groundbreaking achievements in aviation. To further celebrate his contributions, an exhibit titled Pioneer Skies, From Freedom to Flight, The History of Charles Frederick Page was unveiled in 2024 at the Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport, located near the baggage claim. Additionally, replicas of Page's patented drawings, skillfully created by artist Peter Exco, are on display at the airport and the New Orleans Ernest N. Morial Convention Center, providing a visual tribute to his innovative work.
He should have been recognized 75 years ago, like Jesus was not appreciated in his own hometown of Jerusalem. Likewise, Page has been ignored.
The exhibit is an overview of the story Wynn documented through newspapers and governmental records in his book, which also includes blueprint drawings of the airship. Joseph Page credits local historian Michael Wynn with helping to bring his grandfather's story to light.
Unfortunately, deep-rooted racial bias still exists here, and African American history has long been ignored and neglected,
Wynn said via email. The historian describes himself as the unofficial historian of Central Louisiana and has written over 50 books on the subject.
It has been literally a fight for me these 6.5 years to bring deserving attention to Page, and it continues to be a challenge.
Despite the struggle to keep Page's story hidden and prevent it from coming to light, there was some local coverage of his invention at the time. The April 21, 1906 edition of Alexandria, Louisiana's weekly town talk newspaper, featured a story on Page's airship. It read, in part, Charles F. Page, a colored citizen of Pineville and a native of that town, aged about 31 years, has for a number of years been engaged in trying to invent an airship. He first made an application for a patent April 24, 1903, and has now scored a U.S. patent, which was issued to him April 10, 1906. After an examination, we feel confident that the invention is one of merit, and many of the ideas brought out by the inventor are entirely new. And we believe that with this invention, the navigation of the air in a safe manner is nearer in sight than it has ever been. The article goes on to describe the airship's design, concluding, Inventor Page has made an amiable addition to air navigation machines. Several other sources, like the Weekly Town Talk of April 21, 1906, also confirmed that truly Charles Frederick Page made the first airship. The profile of a black inventor in a Louisiana newspaper at this time was notable, considering this was an era of explicit racial segregation in the U.S., with laws being in place that would not be overturned until more than 60 years after Page filed his patent. In fact, the social climate of the time likely played a role in Page's eventual erasure from aviation history. A historian from the USPTO said via email, "The structural racism present in Page's daily life absolutely could have had an impact on Page's to market his invention. Black inventors during this time frame often faced barriers in obtaining a lawyer, pitching their products to industries that were dominated by white men, and receiving fair treatment in court if their patents were challenged. Receiving his patent was a huge accomplishment in and of itself. I would need to do more research to determine what impact this had on Page personally, but it was certainly a major factor in the experience of black inventors of his time, particularly in the Jim Crow South." Further details about Page's invention can be found in a 1974 article in the Daily Town Talk, dated May 12, 1974. According to the paper, Page's family believed that the extreme racism of the time had a profound impact on the inventor's personal and professional life. A notable example cited was the incident surrounding his attempted submission of the airship prototype to the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. As reported by Page's daughter, the prototype mysteriously vanished in transit and was never seen again. This account, shared in the 1974 article, sheds light on the potential role of racial bias in the loss of Page's work and its subsequent impact on his legacy. It was an invention which might have landed Page's name beside those of the Wrights as a pioneer in aviation, had the strange-looking machine not mysteriously disappeared en route to the St. Louis World's Fair.
It was stolen. After that, Papa never built another one.
As we come to the end of this video, it is important to note that in the shadows of history's spotlight, many names have been lost, not because they lacked greatness, but because they were never given a platform to shine. The story of Charles Frederick Page, the black aviator, isn't just about flight. It's about resilience, erasure, and reclaiming what was always ours. He soared not for fame, but for freedom. His wings may not have made it into mainstream textbooks, but his legacy now lives in every uncovered truth, every corrected record, and every viewer who refuses to let his story be forgotten. As we honor his journey today, may it remind us to keep searching, keep telling, and keep uplifting the untold stories that history left behind. That brings us to the end of yet another revealing video segment. Don't forget to support our works by hitting the thumb button, share with friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative, and subscribe to stay tuned into the channel for more informative updates as we continue to shed light on the pioneers who were written out but never truly gone. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.